I remember walking down a path in the forest one evening, the kind where the fog seems to curl around your ankles, and the trees lean close as if to whisper secrets. The air was thick and damp, carrying a faint hum of something unseen, a rhythm almost like breathing, but not quite mine. Shadows moved in the corners of my eyes, shifting with every flicker of pale light between the branches. I kept telling myself it was only the fog, only the trees, but the silence felt wrong, too complete. There were no crickets, no wind, just a soft static that pressed against my ears. And then I saw it. A doorway, hidden in the moss, completely out of place, framed in rotting wood. I didn't want to, but curiosity drew me closer. That's when I saw it. The fog was already thick when I reached the hospital grounds. Late autumn, the kind of cold that slips through fabric and settles under skin. The building rose out of the haze like a hell breath. Windows dark, brickwork damp and flaking. I followed the cracked path toward the east wing. My footsteps felt too loud, each one softened by fog, then swallowed whole. The air smelled of wet stone and old iron. Something sterile lingered beneath it, a memory of disinfectant that never fully left. The door was already open, just enough to invite me in. Inside, the temperature dropped, not sharply, slowly, as if the building needed time to notice me. The corridor stretched forward, narrow and pale. Fog crept in behind me, pressing against my ankles. The walls hummed. At first, I thought it was my own breath. In, out, then it shifted. The rhythm stayed the same, but the sound grew thinner. Closer, too close. The walls breathed with me. I slowed, fingers brushing peeling paint. The hum followed, a soft whisper, riding the edge of every inhale. Rusting beds lined the ward, their frames bent and skeletal. Sheets clung to them like faded skin. Shadows stretched long across the floor, pulled thin by a light I couldn't yet see. Somewhere above, something rattled. Loose metal, or teeth. I stepped between the beds. The floor dipped slightly under my weight. Dust rose, dry and bitter on my tongue. The whispers changed again. They copied me now. Not words, just breath. I stopped. They didn't. A flickering light buzzed at the far end of the ward. Its glow stuttered, weak and tired. Each flash carved the room into still images. And in one of those moments, someone stood beneath it. Tall, still, no sound came from them. No breath joined the others. The light dimmed. When it flared again, the space was empty. My skin prickled. Cold spread across my shoulders like damp hands. I told myself it was a trick of shadow, fog and fear tangling together. Still, I moved closer. Every step felt borrowed, as if the floor hadn't agreed to hold me yet. The bed seemed closer now. Their metal frames creaked softly, though nothing touched them. Something shifted just beyond sight. The whispers grew uneven, out of sync. One breath lingered too long. I turned, expecting to see someone behind me. The ward stared back, unchanged. Beds, sheets, fog pressing at the windows. But the silence had weight now. It leaned in. The light flickered again. Once, twice, the figure returned. Closer this time. Its outline bled into the glow, edges soft, unfinished. I couldn't see a face, just a suggestion of one. The hum in the walls deepened, vibrating through my ribs, through my teeth. I swallowed. The air tasted old, like pennies and dust. The light cut out. Darkness folded over everything. The whispers stopped. In that sudden quiet, I heard my own heart. Slow, careful. Then the light snapped back on. The figure was gone. The space where it stood felt wrong. Too empty, as if something had been peeled away. I exhaled, and the walls answered, breath for breath. Fear finally found its way in. Not sharp, not loud. It settled low and steady, like a hand between my shoulder blades. I should have turned back. The door was still there. I was sure of it, but the ward seemed to lean forward. Beds angled inward. Shadows crept closer to my feet. Curiosity pressed harder than fear. I followed the corridor deeper into the east wing, away from the fog. Away from the night, I understood. Behind me, the whispers resumed. Soft, patient, waiting for my next breath. The corridor narrowed as I walked. The ceiling dipped lower. The light behind me faded into fog. Each step pressed a dull echo into floor. Soft, measured, then another followed. Not louder, not closer, just wrong. I stopped. The echo took one more step. My breath caught in my chest, warm against the cold air. The walls leaned inward, painted the color of old bone. Rust flaked beneath my fingers when I touched them. I waited. Nothing moved. When I stepped forward again, the sound returned. Perfectly timed. Heel. Toe. I tried to change my pace. Slower. So, did it. Faster. The echo matched me, careful and precise. The smell shifted as I moved deeper. Less dust. More metal. Something faintly sweet beneath it. Spoiled by age. I reached a corner and turned sharply. The hallway beyond was empty. Beds pushed against the wall like abandoned thoughts. A single curtain stirred though the air was still. No one stood there. When I moved again, the steps returned. Closer now. The space between each echo felt smaller. I could feel the vibration through the floor, up my ankles, into my knees. I didn't look back. I didn't want to give it shape. The silence between the steps grew heavy, thick enough to press against my ears, thick enough to hear myself swallow. Another corner, another turn. The steps followed. They never rushed, never stumbled. They waited for me to move first. The lights above flickered once, then steadied. Their glow stretched my shadow long across the floor. Something else stretched with it. I felt it before I felt the touch. Cold brushed my shoulder. Light. Testing. My skin tightened beneath it, breath turning shallow. The smell of damp cloth and old air filled my nose. I spun around. The corridor was empty again. Too empty, as if it had been wiped clean. My shoulders still burned with cold. The fabric of my jacket felt heavier there. I backed away slowly. The steps stopped. For a moment, there was only my breathing. Too loud, too fast. Then the silence leaned closer. I moved forward. The footsteps returned immediately, closer than before. They no longer matched me exactly. Sometimes they lagged. Sometimes they stepped early, like something learning. The corridor seemed longer now. Doors appeared where there hadn't been any. Each one closed. Each one breathing softly through its seams. I passed one door and heard movement behind it. A shift of weight. A sigh that wasn't mine. The steps behind me paused. I paused too. The air thickened, tasting stale and electric. My ears rang faintly like pressure building. The steps resumed. Right behind me now. I could feel the space they occupied. A hollow place where warmth should be. I quickened my pace. The corridor blurred at the edges. Walls bending slightly inward as if listening. The steps quickened too. Not chasing. Keeping pace. My shoulder brushed the wall. Paint powdering against my sleeve. Something scraped softly behind me. I reached another turn and spun around once more. Nothing, but the silence felt wrong again. Stretched thin, ready to tear. A breath brushed my ear. Not spoken, not formed. Just air, cold and close. I staggered forward, heart thudding slow and heavy. The steps vanished. I stood alone in the corridor, wrapped in stillness. My ears strained for any sound. There was none. The quiet pressed harder than the footsteps ever had. It followed me without moving. I took one more step. The silence stepped with me. The room waited at the end of the corridor. A single door, half open. Light leaking through in a thin, sickly line. The air changed as I stepped inside. Cooler, heavier. It smelled clean at first. Sharp, like disinfectant rubbed into old wounds. Then something deeper surfaced. Metallic, sweet and stale. A hospital bed sat in the center of the room. Sheets tucked too neatly. Corners sharp, untouched by time. Someone lay beneath them. Pale skin caught the dim light, almost glowing. The body was still, too still. I stood near the doorway, fingers resting against the frame. The wood felt damp. Soft. The patient's chest did not rise. No breath fogged the air. For a moment, I thought it was a mannequin. Left behind. Forgotten. Then the eyes blinked. Slowly. Carefully. The sound was barely there. A faint, wet click that settled in my ears. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. The eyes were open now. Clouded. Milky around the edges. They stared at the ceiling. I took one step closer. The floor creaked beneath me, low and tired. The eyes shifted. Not toward me. Past me. As if something stood just behind my shoulder. Cold crawled up my spine. I resisted the urge to turn around. The smell in the room thickened. Disinfectant fading. Metal growing stronger. I swallowed. My throat tasted dry and bitter. The patient's head didn't move. Only the eyes followed. Tracking. Waiting. I whispered to myself without words. A habit. A way to stay real. The whisper came back. Not from the walls this time. From the bed. Soft. Thin. Not a voice. More like breath forced through something broken. I couldn't understand it. But my name pressed against my thoughts anyway. The sheets rustled. Just slightly. I took another step back. The door creaked behind me. The patient's eyes snapped to me now. Fully focused. They were too large for the face. Stretched wide, unblinking. I felt exposed. Seen in a way skin couldn't block. The air grew colder. Each breath felt sharper than the last. I reached for the door handle. It didn't move. I tried again. Harder. The handle stayed still. Cold and unyielding beneath my palm. The whisper from the bed grew louder. Not clearer. Just closer. The patient's fingers twitched beneath the sheet. One slow curl. The smell shifted again. Fresh metal now. Warm. I turned back toward the bed. The patient was sitting up. No sound marked the movement. No struggle. No strain. Just upright. The sheet slid down slightly, revealing a collarbone too sharp, too thin. Skin stretched tight, like paper left in water. The eyes never left me. I stepped backward until my shoulders touched the door, though it felt colder than before, almost damp with breath. The patient tilted their head. The motion was wrong. Too smooth. The whisper stopped. Silence poured into the room, thick and complete. In that quiet, I heard something else. A faint dragging sound. Not from the bed. From the floor, beneath it. I glanced down. The shadow under the bed shifted. Stretched. Pulled itself forward. It didn't match the body above it. Too long. Too narrow. The patient's lips parted. Still no sound. But the warning reached me anyway. Don't stay. The room seemed to breathe in. Walls tightening. Light dimming at the edges. I pushed against the door again. My shoulder burned with effort. The handle clicked. The door opened just enough to let in colder air. Fog curled through the gap, eager and slow. Behind me, the bed creaked. Once. I didn't look back. I slipped through the doorway and pulled it shut. The click echoed louder than it should have. The corridor outside felt unreal. Too open, too quiet. For a moment, I leaned against the wall, catching my breath. The metal smell clung to my clothes, to my skin. Behind the door, something brushed softly against the other side. Not knocking, feeling. I stepped away and moved down the corridor. Slow, careful. Behind me, the whisper resumed. Muted now, contained, but patient. The room had no reason to be lit. No working wires. No pulse. Yet a pale glow leaked from inside, trembling against the walls. I stepped through the doorway and felt it immediately. The air buzzed. Not loud. Persistent. Like pressure before a storm. The windows were shattered, their frames choked with fog. It slid through the gaps in slow fingers, carrying the cold with it, carrying something else. The smell here was thin and dry. Dust. Burnt plastic. In the center of the room sat a metal table. On it, a handheld radio. Old. Yellowed. Its antenna bent at an awkward angle like a broken limb. It shouldn't have been on. The speaker breathed out static. Low. Constant. It crawled across my skin, raising fine bumps along my arms. The noise wasn't sharp. It was soft enough to lean into. I stood still listening. The static wavered, dipped, rose again. Something moved inside it. Not words. Not yet. The fog thickened near the windows, pooling against the floor. Shapes stirred within it. Tall, unfinished. I kept my eyes on the radio. It felt safer to watch something solid. The static changed pitch. A faint rhythm emerged beneath it. 3 pulses. A pause. My breath caught. The pattern repeated. My chest tightened as recognition crept in. It matched my heartbeat. I took a slow step back. The radio clicked. The static thinned. A whisper slid through. My name. It wasn't spoken. It was spelled. Each letter dragged out, stretched thin and trembling, as if the voice had to search for them. The fog near the windows shifted. One shape leaned closer to the glass. I could feel the cold from it, sharp and clean. No! I breathed. The word barely left me. The radio responded. Static surged, louder now, faster. My name came again. Closer, clearer. The table vibrated beneath the radio, just enough to notice. I stepped toward it despite myself. My fingers tingled as I reached out. The metal surface was icy, damp with condensation. The radio crackled violently for a moment. Then the whisper changed. It wasn't my name anymore. It was breath. Slow, measured, in, out. The same rhythm the walls had learned. The fog pressed further into the room, curling around the table legs. Something brushed my ankle. Light. Testing. I didn't look down. The radio hissed, then softened again. A voice formed, thin and distant. Not one voice. Several. Layered. They spoke over each other, tangled and uneven. None loud enough to understand. All close enough to feel. The walls seemed to lean in, paint flaking softly. Dust fell in slow drifts, settling on my shoulders. I felt small, contained. The radio clicked once. Silence. The sudden quiet rang in my ears. My breath sounded wrong without the static beneath it. I waited. The fog froze in place. Shape stilled. Then the radio exhaled again. The static returned, thicker than before. It pulsed in waves, rolling through the room. A shape peeled itself from the fog, near the window. Tall, too narrow. It pressed against the broken glass, leaving no mark, no warmth. The whisper came back. This time, it didn't bother with letters. It knew me now. The voice slid directly into my thoughts, soft and intimate, too close to be sound. Come closer. The radio vibrated harder. The antenna rattled against the table, ticking like a clock. I shook my head, backing away. My heel caught on something unseen. The fog surged forward. Cold wrapped around my calves, then my knees. The shapes within it multiplied. Some bent low. Others stretched upward, brushing the ceiling. The static grew louder, filling the room until it felt solid. It pressed against my chest, my ears, my teeth. My name came once more. Not whispered, breathed, right behind me. I spun around. There was nothing there, only fog and the faint glow of broken windows. When I turned back, the radio had gone silent again. The table stood empty. No warmth lingered where it had been. No mark. The fog slowed, retreating slightly disappointed. The room felt hollow now, as if something important had stepped away. I stood alone, heart thudding, ears ringing. The silence here wasn't peaceful. It waited. From somewhere deep within the walls, a faint hum resumed. Low, patient. I moved toward the door, each step careful and slow. The fog brushed my ankles one last time before letting me go. As I crossed the threshold, the hum followed, and beneath it, barely there, static lingered. The nursery sat at the end of the shorter hallway. The walls here were painted a soft color once. Now it looked bruised, faded into something sickly and unsure. The air smelled wrong. Sweet powder, rot beneath it. My breath fogged as I stepped inside. The room was wider than I expected. Low ceiling, windows sealed with frosted glass. Moonlight filtered through, pale and dull. It never reached the corners. Small rocking chairs were arranged in a loose circle. their paint peeled in long curls, would darken by moisture and time. One chair moved, just a little, back, then forward. It didn't creak. The motion was too smooth. I stood still, listening. The hum from the walls faded here, replaced by something softer. A faint rise and fall. Breathing. The smell of decay deepened as I moved farther in. Old fabric. Something damp and forgotten. A row of cribs lined the far wall. Mattresses sagged inward, stained and thin. Small blankets lay folded, untouched by dust. That unsettled me more than anything else. The rocking chair moved again. Then another. Slow. Patient. They rocked out of rhythm with each other, like they were listening to something I couldn't hear yet. My skin prickled along my arms. The air felt colder near the floor, as if something small had passed by my legs. I glanced toward the windows. Tiny handprints pressed against the frosted glass. They appeared one by one, pale impressions blooming outward, fingers spread wide. No sound followed them. No tapping, no scratching, just pressure. I took a step back. The floor felt softer here, padded with old linoleum that sank slightly underfoot. The handprints slid downward, slowly, as if whatever made them was losing strength. My throat tightened. I didn't want to know what was on the other side. A lullaby drifted through the room, soft, broken. The tune was familiar in shape, but wrong in every note. Stretched too long, bent downward at the end. It didn't come from the windows. It came from the ceiling vents. The sound brushed against my ears, gentle and coaxing. My chest ached with something close to memory. The rocking chairs responded. Their movement grew wider. Back, forward. One chair scraped slightly, its leg catching on the floor. The noise cut through the lullaby like a warning. The handprints vanished from the glass. The song continued. I moved closer to the cribs. Each step felt heavier than the last. The air pressed against my lungs, thick with sweetness and mold. Something shifted inside one of the cribs. Just a blanket. I told myself that. The fabric rose, then fell, as if something beneath it had breathed. The lullaby softened, almost a whisper now. I leaned closer, without meaning to. The smell here was stronger, metal mixed with powder. The blanket slid back. The crib was empty. No child, no body, only a deep impression in the mattress. Small, perfectly shaped. The rocking chair stopped at once. The sudden stillness hurt my ears. The lullaby faltered. I felt it then, a touch against my calf. Light, cold, small fingers closed gently around my leg. I froze. The grip wasn't strong. It didn't pull. It rested there, as if waiting to be acknowledged. The lullaby resumed, slower now, closer. I could feel breath against my skin. Shallow, uneven. I looked down. Nothing held me. The cold remained. The rocking chairs began moving again, all of them now, in perfect rhythm. The sound filled the room with brushing air. Back, forward. The handprints returned to the windows. More this time, overlapping, smaller than before. The lullaby reached its end. The final note stretched too long, thinning until it snapped. Silence rushed in. The rocking chair slowed, stopped. The cold around my leg faded. I stepped back, heart pounding low and heavy. The room felt larger now, emptier. The cribs were still, the windows quiet, but the smell lingered, powder and rot, clinging to my clothes. As I turned toward the door, a soft rustle came from behind me. Not movement, breath. I didn't look back. I left the nursery slowly, careful not to break the quiet. The hallway outside felt colder than before. Behind me, the lullaby began again, so faint it could have been memory. The stairs were hidden behind a service door. Paint blistered, handle cold and damp. When I opened it, the smell hit first. Wet stone, rust, something old that had learned to stay quiet. The steps descended into darkness, narrow and uneven, concrete worn smooth at the center, as if many feet had gone down. Few had come back up. The door closed behind me with a soft, final click. The air thickened as I descended. Each breath tasted metallic, heavy on the tongue. Halfway down, I heard it. Scratching. Slow. Deliberate. It came from below, carried upward through the stairwell. Fingernails or bone against wood. I couldn't tell. I stopped. The scratching stopped too. In the sudden quiet, something else surfaced. Muffled sobs. Not loud. Not desperate. Contained. Like someone had learned not to cry fully. I continued down one step at a time. The sound returned. Scratching. Then sobbing. They overlapped without touching. At the bottom of the stairs, a heavy metal door waited. Thick. Industrial. A single candle burned on the floor beside it. The flame barely moved, though the air was cold. Its light painted the walls in dull orange, revealing stains that crept upward from the floor. Dark. Uneven. The sobbing came from behind the door now. Closer. I knelt, the concrete biting through my clothes. The candle smelled of old wax and smoke. Its warmth felt wrong in this place. The scratching grew faster, more frantic. I noticed a grate set low into the door. Rust clung to its edges like dried blood. Something moved behind it. I leaned closer. An eye opened in the darkness beyond the grate. Wide. Glossy. It stared directly at me. The sobbing stopped. The scratching slowed, then ceased entirely. Only breathing remained. Not mine. The eye blinked once. Slow. A face drifted into the candlelight. Pale. Too pale. Skin stretched tight. Veins faintly visible beneath it. The mouth trembled but made no sound. I couldn't move. The candle flame bent toward the grate, as if drawn there. The air tasted sharper now. Iron and damp cloth. The face pressed closer, nose flattening slightly against the metal bars. Its eyes searched mine, not pleading, not angry, empty. A whisper slid through the grate. Not words. Air forced through a throat that didn't remember how to speak. My chest tightened. I realized I had been holding my breath. The whisper changed. It formed something close to sound, a broken shape of a word. Down! The candle flickered hard. The flame nearly died. I staggered back, heart pounding slow and heavy. The floor felt damp beneath my palms. The scratching returned suddenly, violent now. Hands raking at the other side of the door. Metal rang softly with each strike, not loud enough to echo. The sobbing returned too, layered, more than one voice now. The door shuddered once. I scrambled to my feet. The air pressed against me, thick and wet. Behind the door, the voices rose and fell together, a rhythm, almost chanting. The eye appeared again at the grate, then another beside it. More faces pressed close, some too low, some too high. They didn't overlap correctly, like reflections that didn't agree on what they were copying. The candle went out. Darkness swallowed the basement whole. For a moment, I heard nothing. Then breath surrounded me. Not touching, hovering, close enough to feel the cold of it on my cheeks. A hand brushed my ankle. Then another. I kicked backward, panic finally breaking through. My foot struck metal. The candle flared back to life. The basement snapped into view again. The door was still closed, still sealed, silent. No scratching, no sobbing. The grate showed only darkness now. I backed away slowly, never turning my back on the door. The stairs loomed behind me, disappearing upward. The candle flame bent once more toward the door. Longing, I climbed the stairs fast but careful, every step burning in my legs. The air grew lighter with each one. Behind me, the basement remained quiet, too quiet. At the top, I threw the service door open and slipped through. The hallway welcomed me with cold air and distant hum. When the door shut, the sobbing returned, muted, contained, as if the basement had accepted me leaving. I stood there for a long moment, breathing hard. The metal taste lingered in my mouth. From beneath the floorboards, something scratched once, then stopped. The hallway didn't match the others. It was longer, narrower. The ceiling lights were spaced too far apart, leaving pockets of dimness between them. Each step carried farther here. Too far. I whispered without meaning to. Just a breath slipping out. The corridor repeated it, not as an echo, as an answer. The word came back slightly altered, thinner, stretched. I stopped walking. The corridor kept breathing. The air smelled dry here. Old paper, cracked paint, doors lined both sides, their numbers scratched away. Some were half open, others bulged outward, warped by time or pressure. I tried another whisper, shorter this time. The sound returned layered, several versions at once, all of them mine. My chest tightened. I pressed my lips together. The lights flickered, dimming just enough to change the shadows. They lengthened along the floor, pulling thin toward the far end of the hallway. I walked again, slower now. My footsteps multiplied. Each step echoed back twice, then 3 times. Not delayed, stacked, as if others were walking beside me, keeping pace. A door creaked open on my left. I didn't touch it. Warm air spilled out, smelling faintly of breath and dust. Inside, voices murmured. Low, intimate. I couldn't make out words, but the tone was familiar. Casual, comfortable, like conversations I'd once had. I leaned closer, without realizing it. The voices shifted. They mentioned things only I should remember. Moments, regrets, thoughts I never spoke aloud. I stepped back. The door closed on its own with a soft click. The hallway stretched further than before. The far end blurred, bending slightly downward. I whispered again, a single word. The corridor swallowed it. Then it came back louder, deeper, not mine anymore. The shadows along the walls lifted slightly, as if listening. I passed another door. Laughter spilled from behind it, not joyful, sharp. It cut off suddenly when I reached for the handle. The door was solid, cold, unmoving. A whisper brushed past my ear, not behind me. From the wall itself, it said my name. The sound crawled across my skin, raising fine bumps along my neck. I picked up my pace. The hallway seemed to bend inward, walls curving just enough to be wrong. My footsteps grew louder. So did the others. The echoes no longer matched my rhythm. Some stepped early, others lagged behind. I felt surrounded by my own movement. The lights flickered again. When they steadied, the doors were closer together. Too close. One stood open directly ahead. Darkness pulled inside it, thick and unmoving. Voices whispered from within, all of them mine, saying things I hadn't thought yet. I stopped short of the doorway. The air there felt heavier, pressing against my chest. The corridor behind me went quiet. No footsteps, no echoes, just waiting. The shadows leaned toward the open door. I backed away slowly. The hallway stretched again, allowing me space. When I turned around, the door was gone. In its place stood a blank wall, smooth, unmarked. My reflection stared back faintly in the paint, distorted. I touched the wall. It was warm. I pulled my hand away quickly. My fingers trembled. The corridor resumed its low hum. Satisfied, I continued forward, not whispering anymore, not even breathing too deeply. Behind me, the echoes followed, soft now, careful, learning when to speak. The door was heavier than the others. Thick glass set into rusted metal. Its window clouded, as if it had forgotten how to be clear. I pushed it open slowly. The hinge answered with a dull groan that sank into the room and stayed there. The smell hit me first. Cold iron, old antiseptic, something sour beneath it, long dried into the walls. The operating room was larger than it needed to be, ceiling high, corners lost in shadow. A single light hung above the table. It flickered, tired and uneven. Each pulse carved the room into fragments. Surgical tools lay arranged with care. Scalpels, clamps, hooks. Their metal caught the pale light and threw it back in thin, sharp lines. None of them showed dust. The table stood in the center, stainless steel, cold even from a distance. Someone lay on it. The shape was clear at first, long. Still, I took a step closer. The floor was slick beneath my shoes, damp with something I didn't want to name. The light flickered again. The body didn't move, didn't breathe. I waited for the rise of a chest. It never came. The smell grew stronger near the table. Metal and salt. Old, but not gone. I leaned slightly to one side. The shape seemed thinner from this angle. Less solid. The light above buzzed softly, its rhythm uneven. My shadow stretched across the floor, thin and distorted. The shape on the table shifted. Not physically. Its edges blurred, bleeding into the surface beneath it. My heart slowed, heavy in my chest. The light flickered hard. For a moment, the room went dim. When the light steadied, the table was empty. No body, no sheet, only a dark outline remained. It was carved into the tile. A perfect silhouette, as if someone had been pressed there for too long. Edges sharp, permanent. I stared, breath shallow. The outline felt deeper than a stain, like a memory burned into the floor. The tools began to shift, not falling, not sliding. They rotated slightly, metal scraping metal with a soft, teeth-on-bone sound. I backed away, my heel catching on the floor drain. Cold water seeped into my shoe. The light flickered again, longer this time. In the dimness, the outline on the floor rose. Just a little, not enough to be a body, enough to cast a shadow. I felt it before I saw it, a pressure in the air, dense and close. The smell turned sharp, almost sweet. The shadow stretched upward, thin arms reaching toward the table. They didn't connect properly, joints bending the wrong way. The tools vibrated now. A low tremor passed through the metal table. I swallowed hard. The taste of iron filled my mouth. The light snapped bright again. The shadow collapsed back into floor. Flat, still, the tools fell silent. The room felt suddenly empty, hollow. I stood there, shaking, staring at the outline. It didn't fade. It didn't change. The light flickered one last time. For a brief moment, I saw it again. A figure lying on the table, eyes open, staring straight up into the light. They blinked. The light went out completely. Darkness poured down, thick and complete. I didn't wait. I turned and moved toward the door, guided by memory more than sight. My hand struck the metal frame. Cold. Behind me, something scraped softly across tile. Not following, repositioning. I shoved the door open and stepped into the hallway. The door swung shut on its own, sealing the sound inside. The corridor felt unreal, too quiet after the room. My ears rang. When I looked back, the operating room door was unmarked. No window, just smooth metal, as if it had never needed to see out. The hallway narrowed again, long, straight. Mirrors lined one side from floor to ceiling. Their frames were tarnished, edges dark with age. The air here felt colder, sharper against my skin. I caught my reflection as I passed. Pale, drawn, fog pressed against the broken windows opposite the mirrors, glowing faintly with borrowed light. It pulsed slowly, like something breathing behind glass. I slowed my steps. The mirrors did not. My reflection lagged by a fraction of a second, not enough to be obvious, enough to be wrong. I stopped. The reflection stopped too. Late, I lifted my hand. The movement echoed back, delayed again. A soft hum crept into the hallway, low and steady. I leaned closer to the glass. My breath fogged it instantly, warm against cold. Something stood behind me in the mirror, tall, unmoving. Its outline was blurred, swallowed by dim light. I felt my neck tighten, skin prickling. I didn't turn around. The reflection of me didn't look away either. The figure leaned closer, its shape sharpened just enough to suggest shoulders. A head tilted at an angle that didn't feel human. The hum deepened, vibrating through the soles of my feet. I took a step forward. The reflection hesitated. When it moved, it wasn't alone. Another shape appeared beside it. Then another. They filled the space behind my reflected body, crowding close. None of them touched. I felt cold brush my spine. A breath that wasn't mine. The mirrors along the wall rippled slightly, like disturbed water. Reflections bent and stretched. I turned my head just enough to glance down the real hallway. Nothing stood behind me. When I looked back at the mirror, the figures were closer. Their faces hovered inches from mine. They had no features, only smooth, pale surfaces that caught the light wrong. My reflection's mouth opened. I didn't. A whisper slid from the glass. Thin, intimate. It said my name as if tasting it. I stumbled backward. My heel scraped tile, sharp and loud. The figures in the mirror didn't move back. They pressed closer, flattening slightly against the surface. The glass grew colder. Frost bloomed outward from where their shapes touched. Fog outside the windows thickened, flooding the hallway with pale light. It wrapped around my ankles, then my knees. The hum rose, layered now. I backed away slowly, keeping my eyes on the mirrors. My reflection lagged further behind with each step. At the end of the hallway, the mirrors stopped abruptly. The wall beyond was bare. I crossed the line where reflection ended. The hum cut off. The mirrors went dark. For a moment, I thought it was over. Then I saw it. My reflection still stood in the glass. Alone, it raised its hand. Slowly, I ran. The fog swallowed my feet as I moved, cold and heavy. Behind me, glass creaked softly, not breaking, breathing. The ceiling dropped lower in this section of the ward. The air felt trapped, warm and stale against my skin. Metal vents ran along the walls, their grates bent and dusty. Darkness pressed behind them. A hum threaded through the hallway. Low, melodic, it wasn't mechanical. It rose and fell gently, like someone trying to remember a tune. I slowed my breathing. The hum adjusted with me. The smell here was thick. Old air, rust, something faintly sweet, decaying slowly. The lights flickered overhead, casting thin bands of shadow across the floor. They moved when I didn't. The hum grew clearer, near one of the vents. The metal around it vibrated softly, warm to the touch. I leaned closer despite myself. Dust clung to my sleeve. The grate hummed under my fingers. A voice slipped through, not loud, not whispered, folded into the sound itself. It repeated a phrase I didn't recognize. The words felt rounded, unfamiliar, like they belonged to another language. Still, they pressed into my thoughts. Stayed there. I backed away. The hum followed. It seeped through the walls, the floor, my chest. Every breath carried it deeper. Shadows rippled along the hallway walls, bending inward toward the vent. They moved in time with the melody. The lights flickered again, longer this time. In the dimness, something shifted behind the grate. A shape pressed forward, then retreated. The smell sharpened. Metal and damp cloth. The phrase repeated. Slower now. Careful. I cover my ears. The sound didn't fade. It vibrated through bone instead of air. Settled behind my eyes. My vision blurred at the edges. The hallway seemed to sway, walls breathing in and out. The vent rattled softly. A faint scraping sound followed. Something moved through the ducts. Not fast, not hidden, intentional. The humming swelled, filling the space until it felt solid. My chest tightened, breath shallow and uneven. The shadows detached slightly from the walls. Stretching, reaching. I stumbled backward, hand brushing another vent. This one hummed too. Then another joined. Soon the whole hallway sang. Different pitches. Same tune. The phrase layered over itself, overlapping and distorted. I couldn't understand it, but I felt it being learned. The lights snapped bright. For a moment, everything froze. Shadows pinned flat. Vents still. Then the humming stopped. The sudden silence rang louder than the sound had. My ears ached. I lowered my hands slowly. My heartbeat felt too loud in my head. The vents were quiet now, cold to the touch. I stood there, breathing, waiting for it to return. It didn't. Instead, a faint echo lingered inside me. A residue. The phrase replayed once more. Not from the vents. From my own throat. I clamped my mouth shut, panic rising. The words died there, unfinished. The hallway resumed its low hum. Neutral. Uninterested. I moved away quickly, careful not to breathe too deeply. Behind me, the vents remained silent, but the tune followed. Soft, internal, learning when to surface. The hallway stretched long and pale. Fluorescent light flickered weakly, uneven, as if unsure it wanted to stay. A figure appeared at the far end. Small, deliberate, her uniform pressed crisp, too clean for this place. She walked slowly, steps measured, echoing faintly, too perfectly in time with the hum of the building. Her face tilted toward me, a smile small, practiced, warm in the wrong way. I stopped, held my breath. She did not. The sound of her shoes clicked softly, perfectly spaced. Each step stretched the hallway slightly. Shadows bent toward her as she moved. I stepped forward. She did not change pace, did not break the rhythm. The air shifted as I approached, cool, metallic, and something sweeter, sharper under it. Her eyes caught mine, too bright, fixed. I blinked. She was gone. The soft echo of her shoes lingered. Each click a ghost tethered to the floor. I stepped forward, heart tightening. The hallway seemed to stretch, elongating the sound. The smile hovered in my mind. Unmoving, impossible. A shadow flickered where she had been, thin, human-shaped, then vanished as I drew closer. I paused. The walls seemed to breathe with me. Soft whispers threaded between the lights. Unfinished sentences, half-heard and broken. Her footsteps returned, quieter now. Behind me, I dared a glance. Nothing. Empty hallway. The echoes slowed, stretched thin across the floor. The rhythm of her steps persisted in the space. I reached the far wall. The hallway ended abruptly in peeling paint and broken windows. No trace of her. The click stopped. The air was heavier now. Each breath pressed against my chest. A faint rustle came from the shadows beside the walls. Not a footstep, not wind, just movement. I stepped back. The hallway seemed to bend slightly, the far end receding further. Her presence lingered, not seen, not touched, but undeniably close. I moved cautiously down the corridor, each step measured, echoing softly. Behind me, the faint rhythm of her shoes continued, not chasing, not leaving, only watching. The stairs ended at a rusted door. Cold metal pressed against my palms. As I pushed it open, the wind hit first. Fog rolled across the rooftop like slow-moving water. Thick, heavy, it swallowed the edges of the building, curling over the railing. Shapes shifted in the haze. Some hunched like animals, others more human. I stepped carefully, each footfall muted against wet concrete. The air tasted sharp, metallic, and cold. A pale hand reached over the edge of the building. Thin fingers stretched toward me, and then dissolved into nothing, misfolding and around itself. I blinked. The hand was gone. The fog thinned in patches, revealing shadows moving just beyond the edge of vision. I could feel their presence more than see them. Cold, patient, waiting. The wind carried whispers, low and uneven. Unfinished phrases brushed my ears. I hugged myself, shoulders tight. The concrete beneath my feet felt damp, clinging to my shoes. Shapes shifted again. The animals became taller, stretching upright, their heads tilted oddly unbalanced. The fog thickened suddenly, wrapping around my legs. Cold seeped in through shoes and socks, a soft pressure at my ankles. I turned slowly. No one there, yet the feeling of being watched pressed closer. A voice hissed from the mist. Not a shout, not a whisper. Something between, curling into my mind. I stepped back. The hand reappeared, hovering at the edge. More solid this time. Veins pale, almost translucent. I froze. The fog swirled in concentric waves. It carried a scent I couldn't place. Wet earth. Something sharper. The shapes beyond the hand moved closer, just barely visible. Their motion was patient, deliberate. I realized then how exposed I was. No walls, no doors, nothing to hide behind. A sudden gust tore across the rooftop. The hand wavered, then vanished. The shapes retreated into the fog, not disappearing, just folding back into the haze. Silence stretched. The only sound my own shallow breathing, sharp against the emptiness. The railing ahead glimmered in the dim light. I leaned on it lightly, metal cold against my palms. The fog shifted again. Hints of figures reaching, moving just beyond my eyes. I didn't look. I couldn't. Step by careful step, I moved away from the edge. The rooftop felt endless beneath the fog, as if it had no bounds. Behind me, the whispers lingered, soft, patient, learning. I left the door behind, carrying the chill with me. The fog seemed to exhale slowly, retreating for now. I hadn't noticed the doors before. They weren't on any map, not on the signs. Just standing there, heavy, metal, locked. The air around them was colder, dense, pressing against my chest. A faint vibration hummed underfoot, subtle but insistent. I heard at first laughter, low and childlike, then sobbing, muffled and close, both coming from behind the doors. The lock clicked on its own, soft, mechanical, like a breath held too long. I pushed the door open slowly. The hinges groaned, stretching the silence thin. Inside, beds lined the walls, empty at first glance. Sheets sagged like old thoughts, waiting. Shadows move along the walls, not cast by light, not entirely separate from the paint and plaster. They twisted, reaching toward one another. The air tasted metallic and wet, as if the walls themselves bled. I stepped carefully between the beds. Each one seemed to watch. The shadows shifted in response, stretching slightly, curling inward. A small bed near the corner twitched. Then another. Then all of them moved in slow, synchronized waves. The laughter returned, higher, closer. But the sobbing persisted, layered beneath it. I leaned closer to one bed. The shadows recoiled slightly, edges rippling like disturbed water. I smelled something faintly sweet beneath the iron and decay. Clothing left behind? Or something else entirely? A whisper slid across the room, thin, threaded through the bed frames. Unfinished words. I tried to step back. The door slammed shut behind me with soft finality. The shadows reacted immediately, spreading across the floor, creeping along the walls. I realized they weren't just moving. They were alive, intentional. A cold draft brushed my neck. I spun. Nothing. The shadows extended from every bed now, reaching toward the center of the room. Toward me. I froze. The air thickened, metallic and damp. Every breath forced through tight lungs. A faint giggle sounded behind me. No one there. I took another step back. The shadows flowed toward me, alive in their movement. The door at the entrance clicked again, locked once more. I moved carefully, letting the shadows follow just enough to stay clear. They didn't speak. They didn't call, only waited. The bed seemed to breathe in unison, exhaling slowly, pulling the room tight around me. I edged toward a far corner. Every sheet, every shadow, every echo followed, a symphony of intent. Finally, the room released me, just enough space to leave. I slipped out through a smaller door I hadn't noticed before. The laughter and sobbing faded behind me. The hallway beyond was quiet, too quiet. The memory of the locked ward pressed against my shoulders. Cold, persistent. I walked on, every step measured, every shadow watching. The door opened with unexpected ease. The hallway behind me stretched long and empty, pale under weak fluorescent light. The room was small, windows cracked, fog curling inside like it belonged there. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant, and something older, metallic, lingering beneath. A single patient sat upright on the bed. Still, too still. Their eyes were fixed on me, wide, unblinking. No sound left their lips, yet I could feel them speaking. Whispers carried in the cold air, brushing against my thoughts. I stepped closer. The floor beneath me creaked softly. Dust shifted in little clouds with each movement. The patient's hands rested on their knees, perfectly still, but the air around them seemed to pulse. A chill pressed against my spine. I swallowed. The sound echoed unnaturally loud in the room. The patient tilted their head slightly. A small movement, intentional, measured. I tried to speak. Nothing came out. The room grew colder with each breath I took. The temperature wasn't uniform. It seemed to pool near the patient, forming invisible currents around them. I reached toward the bed, My fingers hesitated just above the sheets. The patient's gaze followed, unbroken, unsettling. A whisper grazed my ear, not formed of words. A warning, soft, patient. I stepped back. The floorboard groaned. The whisper pressed harder, threading through my mind. The patient's eyes seemed to widen slightly. They leaned forward, subtly, almost imperceptibly. The cold in the room deepened, biting into my bones. I could see my own breath, thin and fleeting, hanging between us. The room felt alive with waiting. I turned slightly, trying to leave. The door resisted, cold metal against my palm, heavy, unyielding. The whispers grew louder, yet still intangible. Not from the walls, not entirely, from the patient. I realized then it wasn't silence that filled the room. It was presence, watching, intent. I stepped back, careful, small movements, every motion mirrored by a slight shift in the patient's posture, a dance I could not control. The metallic smell intensified, sharp on my tongue. The air hummed faintly, vibrating along my chest. I leaned against the far wall, heart pounding slow and heavy. The patient remained seated, eyes locked, silent. The whispers faded gradually, yet the feeling did not. Cold lingered like a shadow pressed to my skin. I knew the patient would not move, not fully, but the room would remember me. Every breath, every hesitation. I left slowly, careful not to look back. The door closed behind me with a soft click. The chill followed, just for a moment longer, then settled into the empty hallway. The corridor stretched longer than I remembered. Fluorescent lights hung above, trembling in their sockets. Each flicker carved the hallway into sharp, uneven sections. The air smelled faintly of ozone, and something hotter, metallic, a residue of static that made my skin crawl. Shadows pooled between the light. They moved when I didn't, stretched longer, thinner, reaching along the walls like living smoke. I stepped forward cautiously. My shoes scraped lightly against cracked tiles. The sound echoed far behind me, then lingered too long. A light flickered violently overhead. It skipped across the walls, casting shadows in impossible patterns. Some stretched toward the ceiling. Others flattened, crawling along the floor. Each shadow twisted differently, independent. The air vibrated subtly, low and humming, like something beneath the tiles had noticed me. I reached for the wall to steady myself. Cold paint pressed against my palm. A pulse ran through it, faint and rhythmic, almost intentional. The lights above me stuttered again. One bulb died. Another flared, then all dimmed simultaneously, leaving only a thin, pale glow at the far end. The shadows responded. They flickered in place, stretching, twisting, then stretching again as if testing their own shape. I held my breath. The silence became thick, almost tangible. I could feel it pressing against my ears. A faint hiss of static began beneath the hum. It grew slowly, threading through the walls, floor, and ceiling. The shadows inched closer. Not fast, patiently, curious. The air around me stiffened. Every breath felt drawn through resistance. My chest ached with each inhale. The flickering lights continued their rhythm, uneven, unpredictable, and the shadows danced along with them. I took a careful step back. One shadow stretched fully toward me, a thin, twisting arm of darkness reaching just short of touch. The static thickened, humming in harmony with the flicker. The hallway seemed to lean inward, watching. I moved slowly, step by step. The shadows stretched and recoiled with each motion. Every light pulse felt like a heartbeat I could not escape. When I finally passed the last flickering bulb, the hallway settled into dim stillness. Shadows clung to the corners, watching, waiting. The static remained faint, buzzing at the edges of perception, a residue of presence, lingering long after the lights had steadied. The door creaked as I pushed it open. The waiting room was small, square, and suffused with stale air. Rows of chairs lined the walls, all facing the far corner. The smell hit first, old upholstery, dust, and something faintly metallic. It pressed in against my lungs as I stepped inside. At first, the room seemed empty, quiet, too quiet. Then I noticed them. Someone or something sat in every chair, not moving, perfectly still. I blinked. They didn't blink back. Their heads tilted slightly, watching. A soft exhale passed through the room, layered, coming from each seated figure. The sound was gentle but insistent, like synchronized breathing. I took a careful step forward. The floor felt sticky beneath my shoes, cold and uneven. The exhaling shifted in response, slow and deliberate. I reached the first row of chairs. Empty. No one there. I blinked again. The figures returned, some slightly closer, some leaning just enough to meet my gaze. The air smelled sweeter here, powdered soap or a faint perfume. It didn't belong to anyone alive. I paused mid-step. A whisper curled along the walls. Too soft to understand, but it carried urgency. The seated figures remained silent, motionless. Their presence filled the room like a weight. I turned slowly. The chairs in the next row held them too, watching, not judging, just present. The far corner was darker than the rest. Shadows pooled there, thick and still. The room seemed to lean toward it, drawn in by something unseen. I edged closer. My reflection stretched along the wall in fractured patterns of shadow and light. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. Not loud, but insistent. I reached the last row of chairs. They were empty again. The soft exhaling remained, a gentle pulse in the air. I didn't dare sit. I didn't want to. The figures remained, watching, breathing, patient. I moved toward the door slowly, careful not to startle them. Each step pressed against my chest, heavy and slow. When I crossed the threshold, the room exhaled one last time, a soft, lingering breath that followed me down the hall. The waiting room remained, still, quiet, watching. The hallway stretched long, impossibly long. Walls narrowed slightly, as if leaning inward. The paint was peeling, curling at the edges like old paper. Faces pressed into the plaster. Eyes open, wide, blank. I stopped. The hallway felt tighter, heavier. Every breath echoed against the walls, swallowed only halfway. As I moved forward, the faces shifted. Not much, just a tilt of the head, a subtle change in expression. The air smelled faintly of wet stone and something sweeter, skin long dried. It clung to my clothes. A voice whispered my name. Soft, layered, overlapping. Each face spoke simultaneously. A chorus of whispers folded over itself. I stepped faster. The wall seemed to pulse in response. Each face stretched slightly, leaning closer. The plaster groaned beneath them. I blinked. Some faces moved even when I looked away, shifting positions like they had weight and intent. The hallway bent subtly, disorienting my steps. The faces multiplied, layering over each other. Eyes followed me from every angle, relentless. A low breath passed through the corridor. Not mine, coming from behind the walls, or perhaps within them. I tried to turn away. The walls extended further. The faces pressed closer, corners of mouths curling faintly. Another whisper. My name again. Then a phrase I couldn't understand, but felt like warning. Shadows stretched along the floor, crawling toward me. Thin, dark, alive. The air tightened in my chest. Every step forward felt like moving through thick water. The hallways seemed endless. The faces shifted once more, tilting their heads in unison. Eyes unblinking, observing, following. I ran. The plaster groaned and whispered beneath my feet. Every step echoed. Behind me, the faces remained etched into the walls, watching, calling, waiting. I didn't stop until the corridor finally bent out of view. Even then, the echoes lingered, soft whispers trailing in the air, a reminder that the hallway remembered my name. The elevator doors were old metal, streaked with rust and time. I pressed a button. The panel groaned in protest. When the doors opened, darkness spilled out. The interior smelled of oil, damp steel, and something faintly burnt. I stepped inside. The floor creaked beneath my shoes. The air was heavy, almost viscous. The doors closed slowly, grinding against their frame. The elevator moved. Up? Down? I couldn't tell. The metal walls reflected my pale face back at me, but the reflections weren't perfect. Shadows twisted along the panels, shaping themselves into silent figures. They mimicked my posture. Almost. The buttons above flickered. Floors that shouldn't exist lit up. I pressed one. The elevator didn't respond. The hum of machinery filled the space, deep and resonant, vibrating through my chest. The shadows shifted closer, not through the walls, not across the floor. They moved within the panels, bending metal and reflection alike. I reached for the handrail. Cold. The metal pulsed faintly, like it had a heartbeat. A door opened ahead. Darkness beyond. I didn't step out. The elevator didn't stop moving. My reflection stilled. The shadows grew taller, thinner, limbs stretching impossibly. The floor beneath me creaked, groaned, not with weight, but with intent. I tried another button. The elevator ignored me. The lights overhead flickered, casting long, twisting shadows. I realized then I wasn't moving between floors. I was moving through the building itself. Corridors I'd never seen. Rooms that didn't exist. The reflections whispered in silence, not with words, with intent, a pressure behind my eyes. The elevator jolted slightly. Shadows converged, then separated, not chasing, not leaving, just present. When the doors finally opened, I stepped out. The hallway was empty, too quiet. The elevator behind me groaned once, then rusted silently. The reflections had stayed inside, watching, waiting. Outside, the fog pressed close, thick and heavy, curling along the ground like liquid smoke. It smelled damp, earthy, metal faint beneath it. My shoes sank slightly into the wet pavement. Each step swallowed sound. Yet there were other steps, soft, echoing mine, just behind, just beyond. I paused. The fog moved with me, shifting, reaching. I turned slowly. Nothing. Empty street. The footsteps continued, matching my pace, circling. But no shadow fell across the ground. No shape emerged from a gray. A shape flickered in the corner of my vision. Animal? Human? I couldn't tell. It dissolved before I could focus. Cold seeped through my socks, numbed my toes. The fog wrapped around my legs, slow and deliberate. I tried to move faster. The steps sped up too, still matching mine, always just beyond reach. I glanced to the side. Trees loomed like black shapes, their branches pressing against the mist. Shadows seemed to twist along the trunks. The air carried whispers, soft and distant. I couldn't make out the words, only tones, melodies broken and eerie. Another shape moved just beyond my vision, lower this time, hunched, then gone. The footsteps stopped for a fraction of a second. I froze, and they began again, circling faster. The fog thickened suddenly. I could barely see my own hand before me. A faint rustle brushed my arm. No one there. I ran, feet splashing through wet ground. The footsteps followed, matching, mocking. I stopped, breathing hard. Nothing. The fog shifted slightly. Hints of movement just beyond my vision. Shapes retreating. Watching. I continued slowly. Every step measured. Every breath tight. The fog remained close, heavy with the presence of things unseen. Silent but aware. Waiting. The corridor glowed with an unnatural pale light. Not warm. Not comforting. Just present. The air smelled faintly metallic. And something else, like dust stirred from long-forgotten rooms. It clung to my clothes and hair. Shadows crawled along the walls. Slow, fluid, as if made of smoke and intent. Every step felt heavy, like moving through water. My shoes pressed against the tile, leaving faint impressions that didn't fade. The light flickered softly, revealing corners I hadn't noticed before. Darkened alcoves, twisted doorways. A soft hum threaded through the corridor, not mechanical. It pressed against my chest, low and steady. I paused. The shadows shifted in response, edges stretching, bending in impossible ways. The walls seemed to pulse slightly, alive with quiet awareness. Whispers brushed past my ears. Not words, just sounds, hints of syllables, Familiar yet wrong. I moved forward. Each step resisted me, the floor tilting just enough to feel wrong. A figure appeared briefly in the corner of my vision, pale, thin, barely there, then gone when I turned. The shadows thickened along the floor. They stretched toward me, not fast, but patient, pulling the light thin in their path. The hum grew slightly louder, the air tasting faintly metallic, sharp on my tongue. I kept walking, careful, measured breaths. Every step through the pale glow of negotiation. The corridor seemed endless, walls bending slightly, shifting imperceptibly with each heartbeat. I realized the light itself wasn't steady. It moved just out of sync with my perception, stretching the space, making me feel smaller. The shadows continued to crawl along the edges, watching, following. I didn't stop. Not yet. Every step weighed heavy. Every shadow lingered. Every breath echoed in the pale corridor. The hallway ended abruptly. A door stood there, solid, unmarked. It shouldn't have been there. I hadn't seen it before. Not on the map. Not in memory. The air pressed against me. Colder here. Thicker. Heavy with unseen presence. I reached out. The handle was ice cold, firm beneath my fingers. It trembled slightly, as if aware of my touch. I paused. A low hum threaded through the walls. Not mechanical. Organic, patient. The door didn't resist as I opened it. But beyond it was only darkness. Deep, complete. The edges of the doorway seemed to pull the light from the hallway. Shadows bent toward the opening, reaching. A whisper curled from the void. Soft, seductive. A single word, or maybe two, drawn out, urging me forward. I stepped closer. The floor beneath me was solid, but the air itself seemed to shift, bending around the doorway. I wanted to leave. My feet refused to move. Fear rooted me in place. The darkness hummed now, rising and falling like breath. It smelled faintly metallic, mixed with wet earth. I pressed my palm against the frame. The wood or metal felt alive, warm, almost pulsing. A cold draft curled around my neck. The whisper returned. Not a word this time. A vibration through my chest. I pulled back slightly. The door remained open, patient, waiting. I dared to glance inside. Nothing moved, yet I felt watched. The hum lowered. The doorway seemed to inhale, exhaling slowly into the hallway. I stepped away. Careful, measured. The floor beneath me creaked softly. The door did not close. It remained, a void in the hallway. Silent, inviting, and impossible to ignore. The hallway felt alive. Not warm, not comforting, just aware. Shadows moved along the walls. Slow, deliberate, as if they were stretching after something just out of reach. A hum threaded through the air, low and constant. It rose and fell in waves, wrapping around my chest and head. The light overhead flickered faintly. Shadows shifted with it, sometimes ahead of the light, sometimes behind. Their motion felt intentional. Curious. I stepped forward. The floor was cold beneath my shoes. Every step echoed faintly, but the shadows absorbed some of the sound. A figure appeared at the corner of my vision, then vanished when I tried to focus. Another formed in the opposite wall, moved in time with the hum. I realized the shadows weren't random. They moved in patterns, weaving across the walls like dancers in a slow, silent performance. The hum grew louder. It vibrated through the floor, through my chest, through my skull. Figures appeared more clearly now, edges soft, ephemeral, almost translucent. They hovered just out of reach, turning their faces away when I tried to see them. The air smelled faintly metallic, mixed with something older, dust, rust, and something sweet I couldn't place. I tried to back away. The shadows bent slightly, leaning toward me, not threatening, not friendly, observing. The hum deepened. Layered voices threaded into it. Whispers that weren't words. Intention without form. I stopped moving, breathing shallow, feeling the vibrations wrap around my ribs. The shadows shifted one last time, merging, splitting, flowing across the walls like liquid light and dark. Then they paused. Humming slowed. Air settled. I moved forward carefully. The figures followed, not touching, not leaving, just present, watching, learning. The corridor stretched endlessly. Walls faded into pale, featureless gray. The ceiling arched too high, or maybe too low. I couldn't tell. Every step forward felt like walking through water. The floor gave slightly beneath my weight. Soft, sucking resistance. Shadows clung to the edges. Stretching, reaching, thin like smoke, yet solid enough to brush against my ankles. I called out softly. No sound returned. Only a low hum, vibrating along the walls. The corridor didn't end. It twisted slightly, subtly, imperceptibly. Every turn I took led me to the same gray expanse. I tried to run. The shadows pulled at my heels, stretching farther than they should, always just out of reach. The walls breathed around me, a low, rhythmic pulse. Not wind, not air, something alive, watching. I stopped. The shadows didn't pause. They leaned closer, curling along the edges of the floor and walls. A whisper brushed my ear. Not words, just intention. Soft, cold, unavoidable. I spun around. The corridor behind me stretched further than I remembered. No exit, no light. Every step forward was mirrored in the shadows. Not perfectly, but enough to feel them learning. The fog seeped in from cracks along the walls. Thin, curling tendrils that wrapped around my legs and ankles. Slow, patient. I realized then, the corridor had no end. It was not a space. It was a presence. I walked on, shadows reaching, floor pressing against my feet, walls pulsing. Alone, yet not alone. The vanishing corridor went on, and I went with it. The hospital felt different, quieter, as if the walls had swallowed every sound. The air was thick, heavy with stillness. Dust clung to my clothes. A faint metallic tang lingered on my tongue. I moved down the hallway slowly, every step absorbed, muted, disappearing into the silence. No creak of floorboards, no hum of lights. The fog from outside seeped in through broken windows. It slid along the floor, curling like slow-moving breath, cold against my ankles, softly dampening the air. I looked into the rooms. Empty. Beds sagged under invisible weight. Shadows pulled in corners, waiting, patient. I tried call out. My own voice sounded strange, distant, swallowed before it could reach the walls. The hospital seemed to lean inward, pressing close. A pressure on my chest, subtle, insistent. I passed doors I didn't recognize. Hallways twisted in impossible ways. Rooms appeared and vanished when I glanced back. Everywhere I looked, I felt watched, not by faces, not by eyes, but by the building itself. I paused, held my breath. Even that seemed loud, intruding on the absolute silence. The fog thickened. It pressed higher, curling around corners, slipping beneath doors. Shadows stretched along the walls, bending unnaturally. I realized I was not alone, not in the sense of another person. The hospital itself was present, breathing, patient. I moved forward carefully, each step a negotiation with the unseen. Each breath pulled against the weight of the stillness. The silence remained, absolute, unyielding, and I understood, finally, that in this hospital, I was not alone, yet utterly isolated. The final room waited at the end of the corridor. The pale glow from a flickering light barely reached the corners. Shadows clung to them, twisting, stretching, patient. The air smelled faintly metallic, and something older, like old linen and wet stone. It pressed against my lungs, heavy with anticipation. The light flickered again, a thin pulse of brightness. Shadows recoiled slightly, then advanced, curling along the walls. I stepped forward carefully, every movement measured. The floor beneath me groaned softly, resisting. Some doors had been better left unopened. I realized it now. The room held them all. Presences I could not name. Figures I could not see clearly. The shadows clung tighter to the corners. Edges sharpened, twisting into forms that should not exist. They stretched toward me, patient, deliberate. The last flicker of light caught something at the far side of the room. A shape, thin, pale, waiting. It shifted slightly as I breathed. I held my breath. The room exhaled slowly, a heavy pulse of stillness. Silence pressed against every surface. Walls, floor, ceiling. Every corner seemed to lean in, waiting. I moved closer. Shadows recoiled, then expanded in the space I had vacated. The figures in the darkness were patient, not chasing, not leaving. The light flickered one final time, revealing only the room itself. Empty yet full, silent yet alive. I understood then. Some doors are better left closed. Some rooms are meant to remain unseen. The light faded completely. Darkness poured in. Thick, absolute. Silence consumed everything. The shadows, the shapes, the waiting. Even me. And for the first time, I understood what it meant to be alone. Truly alone. Within the last light.